Hello and welcome back to another episode of Canada's Real Deal. My name's Anika Dogra and I'm a mortgage agent level 2 in Ontario.
My name's Anuj Dogra and I'm a real estate broker also in Ontario.
And today we're recording an impromptu episode of our podcast because right now the two main political parties in Canada seem to be in a dead heat with each other. It's not clear who's going to win. So we just thought we'd present their platforms through a bit of research and then let you guys make the choice so that you're informed when you go to the polls.
So we thought the best way to present this is we're going to break down each platform into specific topics and then we'll discuss the two parties' platforms for that topic. So I'll be discussing the Conservatives' platform, and that's from their policy declaration back in 2023.
And I'm going to be talking about Mark Carney's plan that was published recently.
So the Conservatives are going to start with what the Conservatives do best, which is prioritize free markets. They want to reduce government interference. They want to lower taxes and reduce red tape, not just in housing, but across all industries. They want no corporate bailouts. They want to promote research and development in the private sectors and encourage skilled immigration.
Whereas the Liberals want to allow territories to play a bigger role in international trade, support large scale infrastructure projects spanning across multiple provinces, and they're open to extracting natural resources but don't seem to push oil extraction. Mark Carney's plan is to try and build the strongest economy in the G7 by uniting Canada's economy. As we all know, right now Canada's economy is split between the provinces and territories, but he believes by reducing internal trade costs by 15%, by removing those trade barriers, we can expand the economy by $200 billion alone. So we'll start off with the economy. So Carney has a goal to eliminate internal trade barriers by Canada Day. So at least he has a deadline for himself. But this deadline also includes recognizing credentials across provinces to increase labor mobility, reducing red tape, and streamlining federal regulations so that everything's a little bit more efficient. He also has ideas to support nation building projects like modernizing the port of Churchill, which is a trading port. So maybe investing more in hydrogen production in Edmonton, which might be a good idea of getting Edmonton to start moving away from maybe oil extraction because their economy depends on that.
And maybe keeping them in Canada.
Yeah. As well as like creating a high speed rail from Windsor to Quebec. What's more interesting to me is he wants to create a trade corridor in the Grays Bay in Nunavut. So not only would this connect Nunavut to the national highway systems in the Northwest Territories and boost Arctic trade, this would help secure Canada's presence in the Northwestern Passage so that we can claim ownership over that trade passage that's about to open up. We don't talk about this enough, but the Arctic is thawing. Right? And that's an unfortunate thing that's happening, but it is opening up a trade passage that will cut off thousands of miles off of trade routes. So naturally, a lot of these countries, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, are vying for control over that passage.
Yeah.
And it happens to run across the northern tip of Canada. And we obviously should be fighting for control over that. America probably wants us to be their 51st state because they would gain control over that passage as well. Obviously, a very strategic part of the world to have control over. So it makes sense that we start maintaining our presence there, and we also start expanding our defense. Our military presence in that area as well.
Yeah, not just that. With it melting, right? There's a lot of critical mineral wealth that's stored in the north, right? So as our Arctic is melting, we have access to all these resources, right? And now I don't know what the Liberals want to do with that, but it's a great source of revenue for Canada.
Absolutely. Like I said, if Mark Carney plans to make us the strongest economy in the G7, this would be the pathway to do it if we were not going to rely on extracting oil. In response to the tariffs specifically, Carney has also proposed a $2 billion fund to boost the auto sector, to support its workers, and strengthen Canada's supply chain so we rely less on America to get those component parts or to finish auto manufacturing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea if we're tanking already in the first quarter.
Yeah. So what's the Conservative economic platform looking like?
So there's actually a lot of similarities. The Conservatives also want to reduce red tape and kind of streamline the processes so things are more efficient. And, with time costs money, that means we have people who are employed but just sitting there because there's all this red tape. Companies are losing money just waiting for permits and because of regulations to get passed. So I think they're both on the same page with that. Pierre also wants to encourage buying Canadian, which is something that I think all Canadian platforms have agreed with. And he wants to promote free trade agreements that benefit Canadian manufacturers instead of just thinking of the entire North.
So you know what? I kind of worry about both parties emphasizing that they want to support Canadian manufacturers, because if it drives up the cost of everything rather than us finding a way to import it for cheaper, we might face another issue on our hands. Like, I think there needs to be a cohesive message being sent out to Canadians that we need to act in good faith and not take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, but think of the pros that come with it, right? We're increasing Canadian employment if we're keeping jobs in Canada, right? So we might want to have higher costs of goods, but if we're removing the red tape and all these regulations, the cost might go down anyways, right? So there might be some sort of balance there. And I think right now we're prioritizing keeping Canadians employed.
That's a good point.
So Pierre also wants to focus on human capital. He wants to improve education. He wants immigration, but skilled workers only. And he wants to support research and development in small and medium sized enterprises. The increasing immigration was kind of interesting to me because if you remember a couple months ago, both parties were saying that they were not going to take immigrants in. But I think now that the economy shifted so much in the last couple of months, we need skilled workers and we need their money that they're bringing from back home. And we need to boost the economy and production within Canada.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about it more in the immigration section, but let's move on to taxes. So, if I were to summarize the Liberal Party of Canada's position on taxes, it seems like they want to provide more direct financial relief to Canadians rather than giving corporate tax cuts. They didn't really talk about that. And on top of that, they seem to want to use taxes or continue to use taxes to elicit behaviors that they think will be beneficial for a Canadian future. For example, to incentivize Canadians to engage in more green practices. So one of the things, going back to the marginal tax rate, they want to lower it by 1% for the lowest income bracket by Canada Day. So a lot of things seem to be happening on Canada Day.
Yeah, let me mark it on my calendar. Pun intended.
Nice. So they believe that lowering the marginal tax rate will help lower and middle income earners keep more out of their paychecks. They also plan to cut the GST for first time homebuyers on homes up to $1 million. And they also have set up to $1.5 million for first time homebuyers, although it's not clear to me under what circumstances they would allow that. But they're clearly aiming to make home ownership slightly more accessible in high cost markets or like in these competitive cities where home ownership is like impossible.
Yeah.
This policy is similar to the Conservative platform because they're also proposing that, but the Liberals seem to be at a higher price cap.
From what I remember, it was the Conservatives who originally proposed this, and the Liberals just implemented it.
And when they originally proposed it, they did up to 1.3 million, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Liberals have set it to 1 million, but then under some circumstances, 1.5 million. In addition to tax cuts, the Liberals do intend to simplify tax filing by automating the process for many Canadians, and so that they can ensure that Canadians are actually receiving the benefits that they're entitled to. And going back to what I was saying about the Liberals seeming to focus on or incentivizing certain behaviors, they're still proposing things like rebates or tax cuts for retrofits, so that people are installing things like heat pumps or other engaging in more energy efficient improvements. And then finally, the Liberal platform continues to focus on environmental upgrades as well. So they're trying to incentivize behavior through these tax reforms. So, for example, they want to propose new funding to make home retrofits easier and more affordable, so that would incentivize people to install heat pumps and do energy efficient improvements with the goal of reducing utility bills over time. They said they would also repeal the carbon tax, but I know people are like, as soon as they're in power, they're going to reintroduce it. I don't actually think they will.
I don't think they will either because they got in too much backlash.
Yeah.
And I don't think people can afford the gas prices.
Yeah. I think if they did that, they would just lose all trust, and they might do it maybe like later on in their term or something. I just don't see it in the foreseeable future. But I also think right now I don't see many people engaging in retrofits. Like, we're all broke. And our houses are not worth that much, so it's like it doesn't really make a sense to do much to it because you're not going to get much out of it.
Yeah, the value isn't there like it was before.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the most attractive tax reform.
Well, let's go to the conservative now. So, let me just summarize. They want to simplify and modernize the tax system. They want to lower personal and business taxes. They want to reduce the capital gains tax, um, eliminate capital gains tax on investments, and obviously they don't want any carbon tax. So they want to lower business taxes to encourage domestic and foreign investment, right? So this is one of the big differences between the two. Conservatives want to keep businesses in Canada and they don't want to give them a reason to go somewhere else like America, especially right now with their tax exemptions for big corporations, right? So they want to kind of do the same thing there. They want to eliminate capital gains tax on investment properties just so that they can encourage people to start renting out homes, for example, right? Because you saw the last year the Liberals increased the cap rate on capital gains tax for investment properties and inherited properties. So they want no carbon tax and no cap and trade system at all. They want provinces and territories to be able to make their own climate policies. So this one's very interesting to me because it kind of resembles more like how the states are.
Yeah, I think, you know what? I don't think Canadians are dumb. Like, I have I have a lot of respect for Canadians and Canadian politicians. I don't think we're dumb. I like people think like conservatives are like so anti-environment and things like that. I think that they're just like, let the market decide. Um, so they're just like, we'll keep our hands out of it. You guys can decide what you want. We just don't want to be responsible for it because of how much everyone hated the carbon tax.
Yeah. And then the last thing, they want to ensure payroll taxes like EI premiums stay at a minimum level to encourage job creation.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting way of making sure Canadians have access to more jobs.
I mean, I kind of agree with this just because if you look at the difference between someone who works minimum wage full time after tax and everything, they maybe make a couple hundred more than somebody who was just on EI or welfare.
Yeah.
Right? So it does incentivize for somebody to start working if they're going to be not getting as much maybe or that there's no future to it as the cost of living increases. And maybe it will push industries to develop more jobs and especially if they're investing to R&D. So I think it's kind of like a full circle strategy.
Yeah, and I think naturally, like more simple than that, it's just going to encourage employers to hire more people because it's not going to cost them as much because they don't have to invest as much into EI.
Yeah.
Moving on to housing, which I think we can get through pretty quickly because we have heard both parties talk about it extensively over the past year.
And we also did a podcast episode a couple of months back.
Yeah, we'll link it in the caption or in the video. But basically, the Liberal Party wants to make housing more affordable. They want to double the pace of home construction by driving down the cost of homes, rent, and mortgage payments, which could impact current homeowners. They propose launching the Build Canada Homes program, which would be a government-led development initiative to build affordable housing at scale. So they would actually build this on public lands and provide $25 billion in financing to support prefabricated home builders and the forestry industry. So they're kind of bringing both of those industries together.
Mm-hmm.
To speed up construction, they aim to expand the Housing Accelerator Fund to cut red tape, streamline zoning and permitting processes, and create more of a unified national housing market. Additional measures, which we could have talked about in taxes as well, is that they want to include the reintroduction of tax incentives for builders who are building multi-unit rental housing. This is a strategy that they used in the 1970s and it worked out well, and they want to reintroduce it. And they would convert existing structures into affordable housing units.
Okay, so let's go to the conservatives now. So first, they want to fire gatekeepers. So anybody who's blocking housing projects from happening, they want to cut their bonuses if they miss deadlines. They want to force cities to free up land, speed up the permitting process, and cut development charges to boost home building by 15% annually. They're also planning to withhold federal funding from cities that fail housing targets and bonus for those that exceed. So they're basically punishing and rewarding cities for hitting those targets. They want to mandate pre-approval of high-density housing projects near transit stations before receiving federal transit funding. So they're kind of tying both the transit budget into the housing budget.
And they're making sure that you actually have people living near transit before they actually start investing in your transit system.
Yeah, so it's not the other way around. So they want to sell off 15% of the federal government's 37,000 buildings and repurpose them for affordable housing. They want to cut federal GST on new homes up to 1.3 million, saving buyers $65,000. And then an estimated 100K savings per home in major cities through cutting development charges, GST, and increasing the supply of houses.
So between these two policies, what I'm starting to notice is the conservatives are pretty aggressive with consequences for failing to meet targets. Like, for example, they'd fire gatekeepers in the CMHC who block housing projects being built or getting approval for financing. They will withhold federal funding, right? So it seems like they're being like a little bit more like, you need to get this done. Like, we have goals and we need to get them done.
Yeah.
Okay, defense and sovereignty. So Canada plans to start actually investing more into our military. We have a NATO target of 2% that we have not been meeting for a very long time. This was part of Trump's criticism of us using or relying on the American military. So it's good that we're actually starting to invest more in that. That might actually maybe encourage Trump to put less pressure on us. And then on top of that, I know people tend to criticize when governments spend more on military because, like, they're anti-war, they might be pacifists, whatever it is. But historically, Canada does tend to improve trade relationships or increase revenue when we do engage in more military spending. Like, this was the reason that we got the Auto Pact with America in the 1960s, is because we deployed peacekeepers to Europe at President Johnson's request. So things like that, we probably will strengthen Canada's economy by investing more in our military.
Okay, so let's go to the Conservatives' defense strategy. They want to meet the NATO's 2% target. That's number one. They want to spend at least 2% of our GDP on national defense to meet these requirements. So they want to modernize NORAD and upgrade the North Warning System and expand forward operating locations across the north of Canada.
So just so everyone's clear, NORAD is a military jointly run by Canada and United States together, and it's responsible for like warning us about anything that's in aerospace or something that's in our space that's not supposed to be, giving maritime warnings for North America if they detect anything that should not be there.
They also want to construct a new Arctic naval base and expand the Arctic sovereignty efforts.
Again, important, especially with that trade passage that's up for grabs.
Yeah. They want to procure new military equipment faster through streamlining that process. So again, they just want everything to be more efficient. They want to create a bipartisan parliamentary committee with expert advice to guide us on defense procurement. They want to support the Reserve Army by ensuring job security post-deployment. They want to protect against internal and external threats, including better coordination between intelligence and security agencies. And they said Canada must not be a safe haven for international terrorism. From what it seems to me, is it's more like the Conservatives definitely want us to step up our defense spending and our budget for it, which I do think might create more jobs. And it seems like we're kind of becoming more like the state, so maybe we need to rely on them less.
Yeah, and I also feel like the conservatives are actually more focused on military personnel. I didn't see as much of that in the liberal platform.
Yeah, it hasn't been such a big Canadian thing.
Yeah, but it should be. I mean, it's been years since we've been spending on military, and it is time to upgrade a lot of our equipment. On immigration, the Liberal Party plans to return immigration to more sustainable levels by capping the number of temporary workers and international students to less than 5% of Canada's population by 2027. Okay, so that's still like after the 3 year expectation of like letting in 500,000 new immigrants, right? But they said that by capping it at 5%, that's still a reduction from the previous high of 7.3%. They believe that this will ease the pressure on housing, public infrastructure, and social services. And while the Liberals emphasize focusing future immigration efforts on attracting top global talent to drive economic growth, there are some concerns about this approach. Critics argue that Canada's immediate need is for skilled workers to fill essential jobs rather than exclusively targeting highly educated or corporate talent. So, unless these newcomers are also entrepreneurs who bring capital and create new businesses, um, we might not be getting as much benefit if we're not actually providing those high or those top level jobs to actual Canadians, right? Or
Yeah.
Canadians have to compete with global talent. But I'm petty. There is the potential that we might engage in brain drain from America if we're recruiting their top global talent, which I'm all for.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's go to the conservative platform now for immigration. So I already mentioned that they want to prioritize letting in skilled immigrants. They also want to make a clear pathway for temporary workers to become permanent residents. And remember, permanent residents are the ones who can buy houses in Canada, right? So they want to improve recognition of foreign credentials, but they want to make sure that there's an equivalent exam to fairly reflect Canadian standards.
Yeah, rather than testing them on things that you wouldn't actually require of Canadians.
Yeah. They want to support family reunification under humanitarian policies. They want to uphold Canada's refugee protection obligations, but they want to streamline claims and remove non-genuine refugee claimants fairly quickly.
Yeah, get rid of that backlog.
Yeah, they want to develop a bridge programs with trade associations to integrate qualified foreign trade workers. They want to also continue pilot projects for temporary workers in sectors with critical shortages, for example, construction, right?
Yeah, like what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, they want to ensure equal labor protections for temporary workers as there are for Canadians.
Yeah, because you know that these international students are being taken advantage of, um, which is just not fair.
Yeah, and it's also money wise, right? If things are under the table because they don't get the same benefits or whatever it is, people take cash jobs, and the government doesn't get taxes from those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as for the environment, the Liberals seem to actually be thinking more about green spaces and protecting or safeguarding freshwater resources. They want to put more money into research and AI and using technologies to protect these fragile ecosystems. And they are also recognizing growing foreign interest in these assets and how they can protect it from those interests. Their platform also focuses on restoring old growth forests and protecting carbon rich peatlands, reviving coastal waters, and rehabilitating species that are at risk. Um, so, yeah, it seems like they still have a bit of like respect for the environment, and a lot of their other policies seem to also be like we're going to focus on procuring um carbon efficient technologies, or especially if they're made in Canada, or will try to produce those technologies. So yeah, it seems like they always have that like spirit of sustainability in their platform.
So we'll move on to the conservative platform now. This one was the most interesting to me, but again, I don't know if they will still uphold what they outlined in their policy declaration, but I'll go over it anyways. So they want to support responsible resource development. They want to have stricter air pollution and vehicle emission standards. They want to support low carbon aluminum through purchasing policies. They want to also diversify the energy security, so including renewables and carbon based sources like oil and gas. They want to encourage research and development for carbon capturing, battery storage, small modular reactors, so SMRs, and hydrogen-based generation. They want to also open up offshore resource exploration responsibly with affected provinces and indigenous groups. And they also want to protect the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River through cooperation with the US, reduce invasive species, reduce pollution, and conserve water. They want to allocate part of the federal gasoline taxes back to provinces for infrastructure development. Um, and they also want to expand pipeline infrastructure to Atlantic Canada to reduce foreign oil reliance.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I feel like there are some critiques that I think stand out to me that are like, I agree with you. There's some things that seem a little bit misleading about this. Like, for example, what was it? They like I remember reading something about them making it simple or making a more simple application process for businesses to engage in like these offshore practices or exploration of offshore resources.
Yeah.
And then they had a 1 year deadline to report to them about whether they're doing things responsibly or not. But like once that thing has started and it's making money, I don't see them coming back and being like, you can't do this anymore.
No, I don't think so.
No, they're gonna be like, you need to adjust this. We want you to reduce this amount of emissions. We like they're gonna put like limits on it, quote unquote, but it's not actually gonna be reducing anything. So I feel like it's not necessarily um improving carbon emissions, but Pierre said over and over again that if we can export these our energy resources out to like the developing world, we're going to reduce emissions globally. So that's how he justifies it.
Now that we've gone over both parties' platforms, I think we can say there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think Canada's actually pretty lucky that I think we have two great candidates, like who seem very competent, very intelligent, and I think either way we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think both are putting Canada first.
Yeah, I think they're very passionate, very patriotic, and they do care about Canadians.
Well, we'd love to hear what you guys think, so let us know in the comments. What did you think about the platforms? Which one resonated with you? And let us know how voting goes.
I guess we'll see Monday.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. Also, follow up, if you still can't decide who to vote for, try the Vote Compass, which is linked in the video and below. This tool will show you which party most likely aligns with your values, worldview, and opinions.